Good afternoon and welcome to UMedTV. My name is Kamal Erkan. I'm here with Sean Donegan. Today is December 15, 2023. Sean, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Kamal. How are you?
Good. So today we were going to have our Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester. Unfortunately, there was a little issue with her schedule, and that was kind of like the last minute. And we are going to reschedule her either for Thursday next week or Friday the following. The way that she's actually involved with her different committee obligations, this does happen with her schedule. And it's funny that I was actually telling Sean just the day before we should just prep enough stuff so that if this happens, so then we don't have to panic last minute. So and then we have a lot of things to talk about. So this is our political series, and as we started this, one of the main thing was we wanted to bring all of our state officials who are running for the next year's elections, either state officials or who may be running for one of these offices. So from the governor race to the lieutenant governor, from the congresswoman or congressman position, and also final for the Senate, we brought a lot of different people. So right now, two of the governor race from the Democrat side is Bethany Long. She actually was with us last week. And Matt Meyer also challenging her for the primaries, and he was with us in July. Yeah. And then we have the lieutenant governors. We had
Sherry Dorsey Walker as well as Kyle Evans Gay.
And then they were both with us.
Both joined us already. And then also, I don't think you mentioned earlier, but we also had for the insurance state commissioner, we had both Trinidad Navarro, who is the current one, as well as his challenger, Coyote Abagunde. Both did join us already. And then, as you mentioned earlier, running for Congress, we had Sarah McBride, Eugene Young, and Colin Davis, all with us.
And when we do this, we do invite everyone. So Republican, Democrats.
Yeah.
We were not so lucky with the Republican candidates so far, but we do have confirmed. Is it one or two different confirmed candidates?
Yeah, so for Congress, it was Danielle Hall. She's joining us in January. And then also, as we mentioned, Lisa Blunt Rochester was supposed to be here today, but with her rescheduling, she is still going to be a future guest, as well as Dr. Michael Katz, and they are both running for U.S. Senate. And then the other one that we did want to mention, fairly strongly certain that he is going to be running for mayor of Wilmington, and that is John Carney.
Yes, and he will be with us in February, not for the election necessarily, but for his last year's budget review.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be first week of February, first Friday of February. So now many of people, they have different questions when we do these types of events. Why we do it? We are a healthcare company. Now, when we look at elections, healthcare is either number 2 or number 3 concern of everyone. Yeah. So that's because our policymakers, which I always say that this is a really important part, we have an active, very dynamic way of making decisions in this country, and our state officials, elected officials, are primarily in charge of all these legislators and the laws, that anything that's new, either they get input from real organizations, real people, or they do it from their own experiences. Our goal is to make sure that we can actually help them and collaborate while they're actually making any changes. And this is not just from one side of the healthcare provider standpoint, but also as an employer, as a business owner, as a person who lives in this state. We look at it from different perspective. Yeah. So now the way that we have, if we were to kind of go into the how we are preparing for these events, we started adding Twitter surveys, well, X surveys. That was a mistake that guy changed the name because, you know,
We know it's still Twitter.
right? So it's going to take a lot of time. So, and interesting enough, for the preparation for Lisa Rochester's live event, we had 4 questions we posted, and we had the most participation so far ever. But I do want to go back to the first survey from last week, and the way that because when we actually presented, it was not fully done. So we finally got 287 votes, and from that, economy with 36%, that was the main concern for most people, and the number 2 with 32%, it was public safety and crime. And healthcare was number 3 with 19%, and education system was number 13, number 4 with 13%. Now, based on this, Twitter doesn't allow you to post these types of surveys in different formats. There's only one format. You can add up to 4 options or answers. A lot of haters out there, they kind of bash me with the way that we have the questions or the options. But the thing is, if they were a little bit smart enough, they would know that there are options and the format is very limited. So always use this, so then you'll see the answers easier. Now, let's go to these surveys, which we are going to address these with Congresswoman, hopefully next week or the following, because we wanted to build our discussion around the 2 main issues. One is the economy, and the other one is the foreign policy of the United States.
Yeah.
And then we were going to add other things altogether. So, Sean, let's start with number 1 question. And what was our question on the first survey?
So the first one we had there, which you'll see in this video share, I'm not sure where the loop is in it, but I'm just going to go in the order of the PowerPoint. But the first one I had we're going to start with is, do you believe economic considerations should influence the U.S. foreign policy decisions? And just to recap, there was a total of 673 votes, and of those, 65% said yes strongly, and then 26% said no, and the other 8.5% was unsure. So it looks like a strong majority is saying that yes, the economic consideration should influence the U.S. foreign policy decision.
Now, we can elaborate this question a little bit, because the way that we actually, you and I, we designed these questions. So what was our goal with the question?
I think what we were hoping that people interpret it as is, when it says, do you believe economic consideration should influence U.S. foreign policy decisions, is that before the U.S. gets involved with whether it's sending aid, making new deals, whether it's, financial or just trading, even like doing the sanctions with Russia, we're saying that prior to having any of these actions taking place by the U.S., should they be considering the economic potential, whether it's a consequence or benefit that may.
The consequences or the benefits. So are we more concerned about what this may cost us or what this may bring us as a benefit?
I'm sure it depends on what the situation is and what the US's end goal is for a particular thing. But I mean, like we're talking about in the recent news that we've covered with Russia and having the sanctions that the US put out there. So that was the goal, was to benefit the US and also Ukraine, who they were providing aid to at the time, but sanctions on Russia would prevent their economy from operating at its full optimum level as it was prior to those sanctions. So not allowing other countries to trade with them. So it depends.
Are you surprised with the answer?
No, I mean, I think before you do any type of action, I think it's rather obvious that you would weigh the outcome consequences, whether it's positive or negative. I don't think you should just go out there and implement a policy or say, hey, we're going to sign this. I don't think as a businessman you wouldn't sign a contract without thinking, hey, what it's going to do for myself or the company. You'd want to, in your mind, at least see what's the likelihood of it playing out, one way versus the other. Obviously, nothing's a guarantee, it's not, hey, if I do this, this is 100% going to happen, but I'm sure you can weigh those, cost, the risk to reward, you could say. But yeah, overall, I think it's not surprising that over 65% said, yes, we should be considering.
So
prior.
the way that we actually, when we look at different items, different issues that people are concerned, economy is always number one. Economic stability, rather, would be number one. So this is related to that, although it's a foreign policy issue, but it is an issue of economics. So if it doesn't have the right outcome, then we are concerned, right?
Yeah.
So now the second question, we had 681 votes. I'm sorry. Second one is, let's do the how would you rate the current state of U.S. Foreign relations? So this is one of the most answered one with 1,025 votes. And this is kind of like depressing. Now, given the fact that Twitter is not the best place to find optimistic answers, this is not a place, so people are not nice, including myself in some cases. Many of the people are a little bit toxic, but that's Twitter. So on Instagram, we post our best pictures. On Twitter, we post our worst ourselves. So, and then that's probably kind of painted with that. So people really need to kind of consider that when they're actually reading these answers. But 1,025 is a good number of people. And there are three options. Again, the question was, how would you rate the current state of U.S. foreign relations? And 79% says poor, 14% says excellent, and 7% says not sure. Now, one other thing that I should say that we did promote these surveys, but we didn't promote. There is no option to just promote this only for Republicans or for Democrats or just for independents. So this is for public. So, your take?
Again, not surprised. I know there's a lot going on globally that maybe is, to use the word, more drastic than more extreme maybe than years prior. If you think about a full-out war with Russia and Ukraine, talk about the conflicts between now Israel and then Palestine, Hamas situation going on. I know there's other, when we talk about our global conflict tracker, there's other ongoing tensions that have yet to be resolved, let alone like improve. And then we're also talking about what's happening with, like, say, China, and they're trying to maybe expand and, interfere with Taiwan or seize that. And I think part of people's response on how you rate the current state of U.S. foreign relations is also reflective of how they view the current presidency. But
well,
I
I
think it's an overall rating too.
Well, we are going into the fourth year, right? So it's fair to say that this is the current state of our current government,
right?
So
time has passed where the influences.
I was a little bit, I don't know if Lisa's team is watching, but I was worried that they saw these results and then they wanted to prep a little bit longer, maybe, because this is not what I wanted to see. Or none of us are happy with what we are seeing, because there is a clear dissatisfaction with 79% is saying that it's not like 54, 55%. It's clear 79%, because that means not only Republicans but also Democrats are not happy with what we are doing today.
Yeah, and
that's a good accomplishment for the current government, I guess.
Who's current? So yeah, and then again, just the fact with these surveys is you need to see what the people are concerned about. And I mean, think about, you need feedback to see, am I doing it? Is this what from a business side, you say, is this what the customer wants? But from the government side, is this what the people want? Like, I represent these people, are they satisfied or proud of what we are doing right now? Or they say, no, let's try something else, like, we're not happy with what's currently happening, let's try this alternative. So I think
So-
seeing these is beneficial for regardless
Mhm.
who's a Democrat, but whoever is in charge of representing people and voting on certain policy, what you need to know what the people you're representing, how they feel, because then that's your job.
So if we look at the relationship with the first question, and the second is like the first is saying that should we get involved and should we look at the economic outcome?
Mhm.
But the second one is saying that are you happy with what we do with the foreign
Yeah,
policies?
they're related, yeah.
So people are saying that yes, we should be looking at the outcome, but then we are not happy what we are doing today. That means most people are they believe that we are not really seeing any outcome, positive outcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just because just recently 54 billion European aid package bypassed the Senate, I believe, and the Congress, and just went directly. This is 54 billion addition to all the other aid that's been given. So it's maybe closer to 200 billion now, right? Just for Ukraine.
Yeah, I think when we first started, the number was like 70 something billion for that initial wave of Ukraine aid.
So that's kind of like like if I was getting these results, I would probably just look into what we are doing and how we are doing certain things, because clearly there is a big dissatisfaction that I see so far. Now, for our first survey that we did 2 weeks ago, we actually posed that question in a different way. And we said, what economic issues concerns you the most right now? So when we look at this one, we have about 778 people respond to this. 37% is worried about housing affordability, which we discussed these with the interest rates and the mortgage rates, how we are actually not able to
the same word.
get the good numbers in terms of getting a loan, and you are now paying 70% more than what you used to pay. The examples that many people would remember with the 300,000 mortgage rate, how much interest we would be paying, and then it's not even affordable at this point.
Right.
And the number two is healthcare costs, and that actually kind of supports our reason for us to be more involved with these discussions, because most people are concerned about healthcare costs. We are on both sides of the healthcare costs. We are a healthcare provider, but again, as an employer, we also provide
it ourselves,
provide healthcare as a benefit for our employees, and that cost went up by 50% in the last 6 years. So, and then that was part of our discussion with Trinidad Navarro, who's running for the insurance commissioner position. Number three issue is income inequality, and number four is the job market. So Sean's take on these.
Yeah, so just to go in the order that you presented them with, the highest response voting there. So the housing affordability, I do think that is, not surprisingly, should be the number one, because if you're, I think, in our example with the mortgage from 300,000 to what the interest rate impacts your monthly payment, where if you're expected to, I think it was around like $1,100 more that you'd be paying per month, where it's significantly gonna impact your disposable income, that now you're trying to buy groceries, take care of your family, any other necessary, you're gonna need to get gasoline to get to work. Your daily expenses. Now what you have left over is that exact same house, but had you bought it 3 years prior, you'd be able to have, like $500 I can spend, but now it's just, that money is just gone. So I think that is a solid number one that people should be, and not only is the mortgage for people buying, but also the rents are going up as well. So
because now it's more costly, right? So it's going to be reflected to the rent.
Right. I've never heard of any landlord or apartment complex lowering rent. yet, so it usually just goes up. But again, that affordability where rents are almost near what it costs to own the house, and the problem there is, do you have that down payment and credit score that you can actually be given a loan based on that interest rate, or these banks are gonna say, no, you don't have enough income or your credit score isn't high enough where we can, solidly say, yes, you can afford to borrow $300,000. So people would not be getting approved at that higher interest rate because they don't have that income to support it. Or is it, oh, we talk about this too, we will see the elderly people having that second job, or when they're on a fixed income, they have to work because expenses are going up, but if they're on a fixed income, you have no alternative, you know what I mean? If a bill is due, you can't, you need the money there to support it. So for that being number one, and then just the income inequality, healthcare costs, job market. Job market, I don't see as I wouldn't say as important, but as worrisome in this survey. I think there are a lot of people still hiring. There are different
We can buy people.
Yeah, I think it's the
Right.
reverse where
Yeah.
it's from the employer standpoint, it should be a concern where there's not enough.
Well, you're hiring a marketing intern,
Yeah, we've had the posting open and it's
and then we have
difficult.
one of the biggest universities right next door, and that's still
Yeah.
taking a lot of time.
So it just goes to show, firsthand example. But yeah, and then the healthcare costs, like you said, insurance going up. So 50% in 6 years, but premiums were.
And
You
that's
need to
that's
have
not
it.
affordable. Just so that maybe like in 2010, let me just give you around like 2010, we were paying about $250 per employee for the healthcare benefit. We were buying insurance for $250, maybe $270, let's say. Now this is 2010, but if you think about the inflation before pandemic, it wasn't a big deal. Today that number is close to $700. So now we still charge the same amount for our clients, their percentages. Their income didn't increase. Like the insurance are not paying more for doctor's visits, right? So, well, you see them firsthand that you can actually look at how much everyone is paying. In fact, if we compare the 2010 to today, you probably see very similar numbers. That's not going to be much different. In fact, today, there are more out-of-pocket expenses, much higher deductibles. And I think the cost to the individual is more than that 100% increase, because now there's all those deductibles and everything.
And I mean, we see that in our case conference when we do those SDOHs, and you'll see where patients are, whether it's, the medication that, they're self-medicating with cutting their doses in half because they can't afford to get their insurance run out for prescriptions. So the last 2-3 months of the year, they say, oh, I just gonna take a half a dose because they can't afford to buy. Or even like transportation, not able to get to these appointments, and it's the cost is, I mean, a big impact. But when you put on some of the patients that have self-pay for that insurance, it's like almost like a pick your poison type thing where, do you want to like roll the dice and hope you don't have some serious, but those with chronic conditions, that's not even an option.
So, and our last question on the survey was?
Last question we had down here. This is going with, how confident are you in the government's ability to effectively manage economic issues?
So, very doubtful is 80%, which is kind of almost similar to the foreign policy issue.
Yeah, foreign relations.
There's 1,116 people answered for this. This is the highest one. It's 80% who answered says they have no hope. Right? And then 13% says they are very confident, and 7% are neutral.
Yeah.
So between these 4 questions, the 2 that actually speaks directly to today's administration, this doesn't look promising. So that's why maybe some of our events are going to become a little bit more challenging for our guests, because they have to answer these questions. They have to find solutions, and most importantly, they have to give hopes. So when we look at the issues overall, the economic stability, healthcare, like climate change and environment, this didn't make the list with the pre-screening. But some, like when you go and look for some of the maybe liberal media, they would put this as, top three, but it's not. Education, criminal justice reform, national security, immigration, infrastructure, social issues, and the post-COVID-19 and foreign policy, racial and social justice issues, and voting rights. And finally, technology and privacy are like these 14 kind of summarizes where this election is going to be. And I think picking these we'll be posting a lot more surveys. So actually, I kind of like doing them. The only thing that sometimes I get annoyed when they kind of like, although I don't care because it's all about participation. So as long as they share and even if they put really bad comments, I'm still okay with that. But one of them says, I don't know if you saw that, the Turk is doing this. So it tells you what this country is. Okay, a Turk debating a black for US policies. The Turk is me in this case. And people wonder why I don't vote. So this dumbass is just dumb. So because somehow he find out that I'm Turkish. I was born and raised in Turkey, but being in this country for 25 years and paying a good amount of tax probably justifies for me being involved as part of this community. But I do still love these comments. So as long as they are not cursing, it's fine. But a lot of people are not hopeful. The people who put comments, other than just answering, like one of them says, like at least I saw a couple of them, very doubtful just because you don't have an option for worse. So like they're not even happy with some of these.
Yeah.
So this actually is a maybe good time for Democrats to sit down and think about because there's still 1 year or 11 months for the elections. And thinking that consider that this is not just for one political party. It is going to be an important process. Well, they have to really spend enough time to process these and then make changes. And I think part of it, again, sometimes I feel like we are going to get in trouble with some of these, but someone who is at an age where we expect him to perform and then he can't. And then the country leader is important. So, and part of it is maybe related to the president directly, but it's not helping anyone else. So if I see these results, I have to kind of really think about, okay, am I doing a good job or am I helping my own people and how actually we can reshape this future of this country in a better way. So because we do make bad decisions, not just on the economic side, but also on the foreign policy and others. And you can tell that people are not happy with what we are doing today. Now, we didn't even bring the issue of the new global currency alternative BRICS, and there's so many others. So people are reacting, in my opinion, to these very clearly. So if I were the government, I would actually take these very seriously. So now, one of the things, just for preparation for our discussion, the supply chain issue that I think it's a new bill that I believe one of the sponsors is our Congresswoman. It's a good idea. I think the intention is good, but how it's going to be done, we have some questions for her, and we are going to actually discuss this. But when we say supply chain, do you want to kind of elaborate that what we mean?
Yeah, so I think it's talking about outsourcing the production of a lot of the goods that may be able to be produced domestically. So I know if you think of like car manufacturers, one of the big ones where people go, like, I'll buy like Chevy, Ford, made in the US, or even other startup companies are saying, oh, this is proudly made in the US versus, in some of the slides, maybe we'll get to them later and might save them for the session with Lisa, but, China being one of the biggest exporters, I mean, it's not new news to anybody. Almost half the chain to see have a sticker that says made in China, but having that, supply chain where I think after the pandemic, you saw, as you mentioned, like that bottleneck where the supply chain, supply and demand, where you have that issue of not being able, you're relying too heavily on these other countries, and if it's not there, all of a sudden, there's that, bump in the road where the price may shoot up because it's such low supply, or you're seeing, I think you had the example of, the doors at your house took like insane amount of time,
18 months, right?
and that was not the estimate they gave you initially, I'm
Yeah, so it's
sure.
gonna be done in 2 weeks, or no, the 6 weeks. I don't wanna lie, so it's not 6 weeks.
So, I mean, that's just, again, case and example right there where you're seeing that pushback, but if you have certain things that may be produced, I know another big one, and a lot of the debates is also the drilling, the oil drilling, the US being one of the, could be the biggest, oil producer. You talk about the fracking that they also use to get that natural gas.
And I know you like that topic, so you don't forget. I just want to kind of echo what you are saying about the supply chain issue. So these are the countries we rely on for the export, right? So the number one is China. And this is, let me just read this. So top suppliers of foreign value added in US exports of business services. So this is for the business services. So China is number one. Number two is Canada. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Number 7 is Saudi Arabia, which is your oil issue. Now, the other question, like these are actually, maybe I'll just show it in this other graph that we have. Look. So this is also, now first one was about the business services, how like the top suppliers. For top suppliers for manufactured goods, number one is also China. So, and all the global issues that we are actually in kind of conflict with these days, China is on the other side of that conflict. But yet there are top suppliers. So now this supply chain issue is crucial because if everything we see is right, meaning if we don't have some backdoor deals that we are not able to tell, and if we take everything based on face value today, meaning that China is on the other side of the table, okay, then it tells me that I'm most dependent on China. Now,
Yeah.
I want to just remember what you were going to remember was your oil, which you won't forget, but I want to give you one other example, which is kind of similar to what we have in healthcare. So when we didn't have the surgery center, we were 100% relying on the hospitals to give us OR time. Well, hospital at the same time who was trying to hire our physicians, our surgeons, which they did some, and they were trying to kind of shut down our businesses. But yet I rely on them to give me availability on the OR, the operating room. And the only way that I was able to get away from that dependency is opening a surgery center. And that's why we got our second surgery center license 2 weeks ago, because we want to have minimum reliance on the hospital system. So this is kind of like every time I see these issues, I always take them in a way that, well, this is what we actually go through in our businesses. It's not just with the countries, it's also with any type of business. This type of dependency on the foreign manufactured goods and business services with your biggest enemy is already telling you that you are always going to have a problem. Now, let's go ahead with the oil.
Yeah, so.
John wants to just drill everywhere. So
I mean, if you look at, I think it was right when Biden won the last election, one of the first things they did was to stop, the drilling, the pipeline and everything in the US. And I know, just we always refer back to other sessions, but think back to when we were tracking the gas prices and we had all the pictures you know, it was each week it would go up by, it seemed like 15 cents a gallon for like regular. I think it was like 4.70 something a gallon for like regular gas, where again, you're talking about the dependence on China seems to be the overwhelming, you know, sole one that we're relying on the most. But if there are options, like you're saying, to where your example, hey, let me open my own surgery center, that way I don't have to rely on that OR time, that's my only option. You feel cornered. If you have the option to have your own oil being produced here, you know, drilled for, and it will also lower the cost for everybody across the country because you're not paying to have it shipped in from other, you know, imported, then isn't that a win theoretically? I mean, obviously it depends on the oil reserves, and you want to deplete your own reserves in case of emergencies, because then you'd really be stuck to rely on outside in like a time of crucial, you know, needing. But I think just mitigating the reliance here and there on certain things isn't a bad idea, whether that's oil or other type of, you know,
Well,
manufacturing.
do you have an idea about, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have an idea about the total spending by US, like just like from any kind of manufacturer, any of the services that we have, like total yearly is 5.9 trillion.
Mm.
So when we look at 20% of that's being relying on a country that we have a really like it's our number one enemy,
There's so much competition with them.
right? So this is $6 trillion dollars. So it's a huge business, and you know we have to actually like, and the reason why we actually do this is because for us it's cheaper to get these, right? So I mean, just because we want to make it here doesn't mean that we want to pay 3 times more.
Sure.
If you are going to do it here, then we want to be competitive. So then we don't want to actually have the same thing by paying them twice or 3 times. So, which in some cases that was the case. So the other thing is that between the supply chain and value chain, that's also kind of important to separate those two, where supply chain actually is more about the raw material turning into a finished product, versus the value chain is anything in that process, and it's in any step there's its own life cycle of that step that contributes. So there's a smaller impact of the dependency. Now, this is not only with COVID that this was an issue. If you may remember, probably I talked about this before, every time we have a hurricane, there is a shortage of some of our medical supplies because they're all coming from Asia.
Yeah.
So in the surgery center, we have, if James is watching right now, he can probably tell you how many different items on a back order because of the shipping. So because of the hurricane. So it's not just the pandemic, COVID-19. This was always a problem. So now with Lisa Rochester's bill, I think they can address some of these issues. My concerns, which I'm going to probably ask her as well, or you'll remind me that I should be asking her, by creating more committees and more steps, and just in terms of, and for the sake of oversight, if it becomes heavier to process these, and just we're going to have 5 more committees to see what this supply chain issue is, that's not going to solve the problem. We need practical, quick results, which I think goes to your point on what can we do here to actually help us the most. So the oil is a really important one when we are trying to push for the electric cars, which are one of your favorite topics, right? So what's the cost of it, and what's the actual benefit? We really need, just because we want to do it doesn't mean that we should be doing it, because maybe the benefit is not there.
Yeah, well,
So
there goes back to your survey talking about was the question was specific to foreign relations, but should you consider the economic outcome? But same thing for domestic. Should you be considering it? Say yes.
So now what do we have on the global videos number 2?
So the second one did relate a little bit to what we were talking about there with the supply chain. also had the manufacturing, but we also didn't want to forget the conflict tracker and the other maybe news that isn't making the news. So I know one of the slides I had in there, I was talking about the Tigray situation. And again, we mentioned how Ukraine and Russia is all in the news. We saw the Israel Hamas. It was, you couldn't change any channel without seeing some type of update, any Twitter feed, Instagram, somebody's posting something about it. But then on the other side, what's happening with Ethiopia and the Tigray region with now the famine going on, and it is not seeing the same type of coverage. And again, is it because with that same survey question, there's no economic maybe benefit be getting involved there for the US? So things to consider, but we didn't want to omit it because it is happening. So.
Well, the reality is this: if US is dominating the rest of the world, then you need to look at what our structure here is. Our structure is all about the lobbying. US is all about legally, you are able to lobby for what you want, right? So if you look at the spendings by lobbyists industry, you'll see hospitals, you'll see pharmaceutical companies, you'll see weapon manufacturers, you'll see oil companies in the number, like in the top 5, top 6. But what also you'll see is where the money is. So right now, money is with, well, you know, when I say this, I think I'm qualified to say this, but who's managing the money in United States is the Jewish businessman. Finance is in the hands of Jewish people here, right? So now it's interesting. In the 70s, if you look at back in the 70s, I'm not old enough to know what was happening in the 70s, but I read. So there was a big discrimination against Jews until 70s, even early 80s. So that changed in a way that now that group is the most powerful in terms of money and in terms of lobbies. So now this is not against the religious beliefs of anyone, but this is about how lobbies are working. So when you're in charge of the lobbying firms, and if your sister company or brother company, Israel, is in trouble, you'll make the whole world all about Israel because they have the power to do it. Now, what's the population in Israel? Is like teens, right? It's not a big number. What's the population of Ethiopia? Is about 110 million. Just the Tigray is not that much smaller than Israel, but they don't have good presence here. They don't have power. They don't have money. And there's no economic outcome for most countries. So they don't care. This is the reality that we live in. Remember what Elon Musk was saying, that the reality of goodness versus not the perception of it. Like, let's read this right. Reality of goodness versus not the perception of it. So people just do things just because it's there from their point, their perception, from their perception, that's what they should be doing. So we are not even allowed to talk about certain issues anymore in this country. UPenn's president had to resign for comments that she made in the Senate hearing or in the Congress, like one of them. So now they are putting the Bill Ackerman, one of the billionaires, he's putting a lot of pressure on the Harvard president to resign, the Yale president to resign. Why? Because they don't think the way that he does, but he has the money. So, well, that's why we are actually talking about those. And today, I sent you the video, right? The
Ukraine one.
There is a press reporter in Israel, Turkish guy. He was being beaten by Israeli soldiers just because he was doing his job. So this is happening. And it's not like, like I always say, and then I borrow this from Robert Sapolsky. So we don't hate the violence, we just hate the kind of violence. So if we do it because it's going to benefit us, we love it. We just want to kill everyone. But if it doesn't, if it's harming us, then we don't like that. So that's how this whole, today's reality is. So, but we still need to keep doing what we are doing and make sure that people who are decision makers, they hear what we need to say. So because of that, I believe what we do in these events is extremely important. Because I think that's the only way that we can call out these people who say, the reporter says, oh, the the guys from Ukraine is just like us, the refugee, because it's the blue-eyed blonde person versus the one from Syria is not, so we won't let them in, but we let this person in. We want to actually fight against those because that's also the society that we live in. So we cannot really we cannot turn our heads to these types of things because that's, as a healthcare provider, that's part of what we do. Because what do we deal? One of the number one issue that we deal with is depression in this country. Mm-hmm. Why do you think people are depressed? Because everything that's happening around them.
They watch the news.
Right. So, well, they don't only watch the news, but they also process them and then see how bad these decisions are made. And that's why they are not hopeful for the future. So, but we'll be here in a couple of minutes. We have Bariatric Friday. We are going to talk about navigating holidays. This is more about our patients who are going through the bariatric surgery process, or anyone, if you are one of us who is adding 10 pounds every year during the holiday season, you may benefit from watching that event also. And hopefully next week, because I'm not here on Friday, so we give the Congresswoman two options. Mm-hmm. So we'll make an exception. And then if she's available, we'll do it next Thursday. Otherwise, we'll be back on the 29th. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Sean, thank you for your contribution as well. So we did a lot of work, and we'll be coming back with new surveys and new topics. Until then, please stay safe. We'll see you soon.